I would like to introduce our keynote speakers. They've been waiting so patiently. Maureen, Caitlin, Demetrius on the end, then Maureen, then Caitlin, then Juan. They were highly recommended to me by Carl Brand, who was on the IUE Advisory Council. And I was talking to him in IUE Advisory Council, saying I really want someone who can really make that connection between the importance of partnerships with the classroom and schools and the community and the university. And this team, they do that. They're going to talk to you today about a program that they were involved in, Grow Your Own program, where they work with teachers and helping teachers, student teachers and producing teachers. And so they're going to share with us their work, and they're going to be interactive. And they said it's okay if you have questions for them as they talk to you about their program and what they do. Please ask questions. I asked them to introduce themselves. And so with further ado, you guys are welcome to begin. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Tracy. Is that working? No.
No.
They were working a minute ago. There, that one went. Okay, good morning. Wake up, everybody. I am happy to be back in Badgerland. I'm a graduate of UW-Madison. And I see a guy. And he's got a badger on his shirt. But I grew up in Chicago. Oh, yeah, huh?
Cougar.
Cougar?
Pantherland, I'm sorry, Pantherland right here.
Oh, excellent. Okay, I don't know where that is, but okay. Oh, here. Oh, excellent. And I taught, in order not to have to pay out-of-state graduate tuition, in Cross Plains and Monona when I was here many years ago. So thrilled to be back, and we are excited to talk to you. When Tracy called me, I said, yeah, I'll be glad to talk about this, but I can't do it without my partners. So unfortunately, most of you probably know how bad the situation is in Illinois right now in terms of funding education, both higher ed and P-12. So our principal, Jimmy Lugo, the principal of Harriet Beecher Stowe Elementary School, could not be here, but he did, don't look at it now, put a great article in your packet about hiring our Grow Your Own teachers, which I will share with you. But we're going to just take 1 minute to introduce ourselves. I'm Maureen Gillette. For the past 11 years, I've been Dean of the College of Education at Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago, which is the most diverse master's comprehensive university in the Midwest. I'm going to let Juan go.
Good morning.
You got to talk here.
It's Oregon.
Oh, okay.
Good morning. I'm very happy to be here. First and foremost, I would like to thank Dean Gillette for the invitation. And also the hospitality here at UW Milwaukee is awesome, so thank you very much for having us. And yes, just pretty much what has been echoed here throughout the whole day. The partnerships between communities, schools, universities has provided me with the opportunity to become a teacher. And not only am I a teacher, which, I mean, it's a very noble profession, but I happen to be able to be a teacher in the community where I grew up on. And that is something that really, really resonates with my students. And it's not something that you could readily identify in a book and be like, oh, it's this. It's mainly something that, till this day, this is my fifth year teaching, I'm still not quite able to put my finger on it. It's somewhat unfair to some of my colleagues to an extent, but nonetheless, it's an awesome experience, and I hope to be able to share my insight with all of you.
No?
Oh, there you go.
Patience. My name is Caitlin Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of Action Now in Chicago. We are a community-based organization that works in low-income Black communities to organize the residents to make a positive impact in their own lives through changing public policy and addressing the issues that they're affected by, issues related to poverty, issues related to the need for housing, and also issues related to education. I started off as a Grow Your Own coordinator a very long time ago. And worked with Dr. Gillette since a long time. And so I was able to be to work with candidates like Juan Luis and Demetrius, who was in Action House cohort, to really build the bridges between the community and the classroom. And we'll talk more about that later.
My name is Demetrius Davis. I am Director of Recruiting and Family and Community Partnerships at Catalyst Maria Charter School in Chicago. I'm also a co-pastor of a millennial church, if you will, in the downtown neighborhood of Chicago. In addition to that, I'm a social activist, and all of these three areas of my life kind of weave themselves together and manifest in each of the three areas. I'm very passionate about education as a means to social uplift, because without that, one does not have the tools to participate in the upper stratum of society. So I'm excited to be here to have this opportunity to talk about my GYO journey and what it looks like to incorporate some of our learnings into your respective spaces.
So my job is to start out, what is the Grow Your Own Teacher Program? What is the Grow Your Own Teacher Program and how do we get started? So I had a program that was a high school pipeline when I was in Paterson, New Jersey. So I came to Illinois really with a commitment, and I was a teacher on the east side of Aurora, Illinois, where I grew up, a commitment to community-based teachers, but I didn't have a frame to put that in. So I came to Chicago, I moved back to Chicago, my home, and received what could be the biggest professional gift of my life, and that's the Grow Your Own Teacher Program. So Northeastern Illinois, over time, has grown to partner with 6 community-based agencies. So Grow Your Own is a partnership between a community-based agency, a high institution of higher ed, and a school district, and sometimes a community college, not always. But how did this get started? So unfortunately, Lisette Moreno could not be with us. She was supposed to be on the panel. She worked for Logan Square Neighborhood Association and got laid off because of the budget situation in Illinois. So she actually has gone back to the classroom as a teacher, and she had new teacher orientation today, so she couldn't come. Logan Square Neighborhood Association in the Logan Square neighborhood in Chicago on the northwest side each community-based agency works on issues that bring together the important things in their community. And they started working with immigrant moms who were intimidated by school. And they put them in the classroom as teacher aides. So the moms and some dads would be in the classroom Monday through Thursday, half day, helping out the teacher. They wrote a workforce development grant to pay them, and then on Friday they would get training. And after about a year, some of the moms are like, well, why can't we be teachers? And the organizers thought, yeah, why can't they be teachers? Who would be a better teacher than someone who lives in the neighborhood, is committed to the neighborhood, understands the kids in the neighborhood because they are parents, and won't leave the neighborhood like some programs we know that put teachers in high-need urban and rural poverty schools. So they wrote a teacher quality partnership grant with Chicago State University and began to get these parents into the classroom with the idea that they would go back. And right now, out of that first cohort of 22, 20 are still teaching or administering in Chicago public schools. So, but as they got going, the other organizers who all hang out together in Action Now, Southwest Organizing Project, Kenwood Oakland Community Organization of the Northeast, these are all community-based agencies in different parts of Chicago that work on issues pertinent to their area. They said, well, we are really upset about teacher turnover. I heard last night, I got to sit with dinner with some of you great teachers, and I heard over and over about how there's shortages, given what's going on in Wisconsin, and we know Illinois teachers are leaving, they're choosing to go to other states. How do we get good teachers to stay who really understand those communities? So they said, well, we can do this, and here, I could write a book, maybe when I retire I will, about what I've learned from working with organizers. So they got a law passed. They don't mess around. They just got a law passed, the Grow Your Own Teacher law, and when I arrived in Illinois, the Grow Your Own organization was going around forging partnerships between community-based agencies and higher ed institutions and school districts. So we have the Behemoth, Chicago Public Schools, and we began working with Caitlin's organization. That was our first partner. All of those other organizations were with another university. And so one of the things, when we get to the why does this work, why do these partnerships work? We're going to talk about what happens if you're not committed to the vision. But we were able to recruit people like Juan Luis and Demetrius and so many others. I've been in their classroom, I've seen them teach. We are now in our 11th year. Of course, we've lost funding because there's no budget in Illinois, but we'll talk about that later. How do you sustain momentum without any money? But I've never ever in my life seen teachers who connect so clearly to kids, who understand the community they work in, and I always say, today's kids, they don't care if there's a stranger in the classroom, they're gonna goof off. You know, so my sitting in the back of Demetrius and Juan Luis's classroom really had no effect on how the kids behave, but our Grow Your Own teachers, I will just go out on a limb and say, rarely do they have discipline problems because they know how to build relationships with kids. And that's where organizing, the principles of good organizing, come together with the principles of good teaching. And so these teachers have been raised up jointly by the university and the community-based organizations, which Caitlin's going to talk about next. Yeah, there we go.
There we go. So this slide really shows, so Action Now and other community organizations, you know, we believe in the power of the people in our community. We believe that people, once engaged, can be able to shape the policies that are affecting their lives and make a difference. And so we work on building that power and building that capacity around issues that they care about. So we work on everything from housing equity, Fight for 15, raising the minimum wage, parent mentorship, fighting for an elected school board, restorative justice, immigration, healthcare issues. And so these are all the issues that the students in the classroom, their families and themselves are facing. And so when we started working with Grow Your Own, kind of an extension of what you were saying, the Logan Square model came to one of our neighborhoods and they're like, hey, what do you guys think about this? And it turns out we were having same struggles with teacher turnover. A lot of our members who were involved in our organization had tried everything to get teachers to stay. We created a teaching institute that like literally took teachers hand by hand and introduced them to all of their students' families. We tried everything. And what we heard time and again is, oh, we're just gonna be here for 2 years.
Yeah.
So this is nice, thanks. And then they leave. And so when we heard about the Logan Square model, we're like, well, what would that look like in a neighborhood like North Lawndale, where it's predominantly Black, where it's extremely low income? And it turns out the model works there too. And so we were able to find, one of our first candidates was actually a school secretary, and she's like, I've always wanted to be a teacher. I've been, seeing how the classroom works, and I want the opportunity to be able to try this myself. And, we ended up having kind of a broad spectrum of people who had always had the desire to teach, but never had the opportunity. And these same people who understood the communities because they're from there. They live across the street from the school. They grew up, they went to that school themselves. And part of the partnership between the community-based organization and the higher education institution is we're able to provide skills and experiences that are complementary, where we can take something that we're experiencing in the community and directly connect it to something that teachers are learning and learning how to share in the classroom. We had, how many graduates did we have?
We have, from Northeastern, we have 58 graduates now, most of whom are teaching in Chicago Public Schools.
So, part of seeing this process go along and kind of figuring out what works, how are we able to, because we come from what initially we thought were different perspectives. Community organizing is all about, building power and addressing public policy, and education has not always been about that. But we were able to work it out because we built a relationship and we had a shared commitment to wanting to make sure that the kids in the classroom reach their full potential. And we wanted to make sure that the teachers are able to have the skills that they need to be absolutely academically sound, but also very rooted in the community and understanding that the students that are in their classroom are going to have all of these issues going on, and understanding the root causes of that so they can better address what's going on with the students.
So, is that working? Demetrius and Juan Luis are gonna tag team a little and talk about why, from their perspective as community members in the community, this is so important.
There is numerous reasons why this is of a lot of importance, but as I mentioned earlier, it's hard to pinpoint a specific and say it's because 1 + 1 = 2 and that's the reason why it's working. It goes farther than that. And the best way that I could do is, I guess I could give you an example of maybe just an ordinary day in my classroom and how me being part of the community and being aware of what's happening in it actually benefits the students definitely, always the students first. But me as an educator, it makes my job a lot more manageable, a lot easier just by being aware of what's happening in the neighborhood.
You don't have to stay sitting if you don't want to. You look like you're, I know you.
You know what I mean? I'll step back a bit.
You can walk around.
Well, as I was getting back to giving you a specific example, during, I think this last school year, it was the first week of school. In my community, there's a lot of bungalows, as there is all over the Midwest. You know, just a typical single-family home with a basement dwelling and an attic. It had been a very, very heavy rain all throughout the weekend. I'm talking about just downpours. I happen to know because my parents live up 2 blocks away from my school. I live about 6 blocks away. As I'm driving through my car, I'm noticing a lot of people taking out all their furniture, everything that was in the basement, because it's soaked. Now I'm getting to my classroom, like once again, I'm telling you, it's the beginning of school. I'm trying to establish, my routines, my procedures, trying to let them know that there's no such things as excuses. However, I noticed that my kids are coming in, obviously not sleeping. They just look tired. I put 2 and 2 together. I'm like, oh, I'm assuming you might have had water in your basement, correct? Now, a lot of these students live in the basement. It's not necessarily a legal unit per se, but they happen to be living in those situations. Instead of me coming down and be like, what? And just exploding, when you're trying to establish routines and norms in your classroom, I took a step back. I took it like, hey, so there was a lot of rain this weekend, huh? How many of you guys got water? And instead of having our usual daily vocabulary challenge, and turn into a discussion about, oh, we have water in our basements. This is not something that we can just put away, because when we get back home, it's still going to be there. All of our clothes are wet. There might not necessarily be dinner on the table because we're still trying to recover from the rain that just fell. Point being, just by being aware of what's in the neighborhood makes you a lot more understandable to what is happening with your students. If your students realize that, holy cow, this guy's actually human. He's not just a robot that loves to collect homework. He actually has compassion for my well-being and his understanding. That day I told him, tell you what guys, we're going to postpone homework, we're going to do everything else, and I just took that as a teachable moment and be like, well, how old are these houses? Being a social studies teacher, I did back to doing a kind of investigation on bungalows. I used that to engage them, I used that to try to get them a little bit more history context as far as the Chicago neighborhoods and where they're coming from. And at the end of the day, they just respected me more for, once again, being a human being and not being a crazy teacher that just loves to collect homework because they have no life. That's about it.
I'm going to ask Juan Luis to really quickly tell the story of one story he told me when I spent the day with him in his classroom about the other teachers who don't live in the community, what they say to him at the faculty meetings. Do you remember that story?
I'm not sure.
He doesn't remember that story. So I had a semester off to go into the classrooms of the Grow Your Own teachers, and I stayed all day, most of the day, and definitely through a lunch or a planning period when I could talk to them. And he was in a different school than he is now. The school he's in now is one of our Grow Your Own partner schools. He was in a different school, and he said to me, I gotta get out of this school because my colleagues who come from a different program where people only have to stay 2 years, don't understand what it's like. And he said every time I go to the faculty meetings, they're talking bad about the neighborhood and they don't understand the parents. And then they see me and they go, oh, sorry, Martinez, I forgot you live here.
Yeah, that happens a lot. And that's another thing. Thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Gillette, because not that I'm defending my neighborhood, not that I'm going to be on a crusade for like, oh, this is the best neighborhood in America. And it's not like that. But at the end of the day, it is my neighborhood. It's where I have my memories. And I do want a bit of respect. And I am sorry that there's not a Starbucks in every single corner in my neighborhood. There's actually a corn man and a paletero. And you know what? That is just as wholesome and even cheaper and better for me. And that's just one thing that, thank you for bringing that up. I did hear that a lot. This was a school that was a turnaround school. A lot of the teachers were there precisely just to get the experience and then shoot up as quickly as you possibly could into a suburb where there's more affluent students. And one thing that I made a stand since day one was like, please don't talk bad about my students because thanks to them we have a paycheck because at the end of the day that's what it is. And second of all, I'm like, this is not a bad neighborhood. Like, I don't know if it's a conversation topic, something you go by the water cooler and like talk bad about something, but it's not. Yes, there is killings all over Chicago, there is murders, there is crime, unfortunately, but it's not the highlight of every weekend. There is, for every bad thing that happens in my neighborhood, there's about 1,000 million things that are positive, great, out of this world, but unfortunately those don't draw ratings, those don't get coverage, those don't, create mass panic and, I don't know, fear. And unfortunately, that's for it's not covered. But yes, I do remember now. Thank you for jogging my memory.
Awesome. So I'm gonna walk a little bit, help myself stay up and at it. So to Juan Luis's point about just the frustration that can come along with it, it is very much a thing. I was in a meeting a few days ago with an administrator, and one of my roles at the school is recruiting. And I was having a conversation about, hey, I think the reason that we have not met some of our numbers, the reason that we have so many applicants, so many students that have been accepted that have not yet had their parents come in to actually enroll or register yet, is because they know they have to pay the fee. And the fee isn't cheap, it's $155. Now for us middle and upper middle class administrators and church and school office staff that were in that meeting, that $155 is a matter of us deciding to write a check. But what I understand about those families from the community that we serve is $155 to them is the equivalent of about $500 or $600 to those of us that were seated in that room. And so one statement that was made when I gave pushback about fees this was from an administrator, well, people need to understand that if they want their kids to have good education, they have to invest in it. It was a horrible conversation. It was one of those pushing me to think once again about quitting types of remarks that was made. But it was just an indication of the kinds of mindsets that can operate totally unintentionally, and totally with the sense that I am crusading for pushing people to invest in their education. But here's the problem with that statement. It presupposes, first of all, that these people don't value investing in their kids' education. I've met with parents who, to make sure that their kids have a good quality education, have been taking their kids from the southwest side of Chicago to the north side of Chicago at 7:30 a.m. To make sure that their kids have a quality education. Now, for perspective in Chicago terms, to get that distance at 7:30 a.m., we're talking about 45 minutes to an hour commute. So that's what that kid has to do, rain, sleet, or snow, to get to school, rain, sleet, or snow, to get from school back to home. And so a parent that's willing to go through that is not a parent that is apathetic about their kids' education. But when we have a reality of 1 in 5, 1 in 6 families being food insecure in Chicago, $155 multiplied by how many children you have in the school is nothing to sneeze at. I bring that up because I think it illustrates the importance of having people at the table who understand not just statistically, but understand intimately with how the economics of the community works, so that one can ensure that there's empathy that one brings to the table. I want to share just a couple of anecdotes about my experience, and hopefully kind of make the case for why growing one's own teachers is important. So I used to do an open gym, basketball open gym, and it started out with just one kid that saw me shooting around in the gym, and he liked my game, and he asked me if I wouldn't mind mentoring him in basketball. He was a freshman at the time. I was teaching, he was one of my students. So I began working out with him a few days after school. We would do drills together, and then a few of his friends showed up, and so I worked with them too. And then after a while, it turned out to be about 12 to 14 kids who would show up. So this thing went from me working one-on-one with one kid to help him with his jump shot, to me almost coaching a basketball team. And so every day they would come to my class, they would ask me if we can play in the gym today. So a lot of days we decided to do it. And so in order to facilitate this kind of training, we had to move from just doing the work on the court to actually doing work in the classroom after school. So then after school, we would meet in my classroom, we would watch some skill drill videos on YouTube. I would do some X's and O's stuff on the whiteboard. And they would really get into this, and then we would go down, and I wouldn't just let them play basketball. I would make them invest about an hour in just drills, in learning to play the game better. And what was incredible was that they all locked into it. And they were at different skill levels. There were some kids that were very, very strong basketball players, and then there were two kids who, whenever we scrimmaged, whenever they got the ball, everybody screamed, "Pass the ball." It was either pass the ball or don't shoot. But what was incredible is even those two guys gave everything they had. They were locked into the stuff in the classroom. They were locked into what they were learning on the court. And so I analyzed and I wondered why that was. Like, why some of the same students that teachers would have challenges with in the classroom would give them challenges there, but they would do anything that I asked them to do on the basketball court. Even though they weren't good at it, they would still do anything that I asked them to do. They would be embarrassed on the court. You know, one kid would just frequently fall for no reason on the basketball court, like he didn't have good balance yet. And kids would make fun of him, but every time we had open gym, he would come back, he would play. And I've seen kids who can be struggling readers and will shut down and not read because of the same fear of being made fun of. And so I wondered, why would on this basketball court they be willing to risk all this embarrassment and put in this hard work? Here's what I concluded, because I see a lot of myself in these couple of boys. I believe it's because I believe because of this. For these black boys, among all the things that they believe that they can be in life, they believe that they can be professional athletes. The reason that they believe, despite me going on my rants in the classroom, drawing up statistically how impossible this is, the reason that they believe is because they see themselves. Right? We're about to enter into the biggest kind of sports seasons of the year. Football's beginning tonight actually. Football begins tonight. And then we go into basketball season. They're going to see themselves all over that field. They're going to see themselves all over that court. And so they believe naturally that this is something that I can do and this is something that I can be successful in. And so then I think then the importance of the teacher of color in the classroom, and that's really what Grow Your Own is about. It is unmistakably about putting not just teachers from the neighborhood, but putting teachers of color in the classroom. It is because it provides counter narrative. It provides an opportunity for them to see themselves as intellectuals, as thought leaders, as professionals. Some of my colleagues, wonder how, I could have all these misses as it relates to kind of like how one ought to systematically be a teacher, run a classroom. I could ruin all those things and still command the attention of my class. And they wonder how I'm able to do that. The reason that I'm able to do it is because I showed up, right? I showed up in class. I was an African American man, and I dressed nice. And I enunciated my words really well. I was articulate. I was compassionate. I was prepared with my lesson. I was knowledgeable, right? And another teacher could do the same thing, but because that teacher is not the teacher who the child sees themselves in, child is locked in at a different level, right? Barack Obama is not our first articulate president, but he does something for me that our other presidents have never done. The reason is because when I see him, I see myself. When I see him run down the steps of Air Force One, I see myself. I see my own possibilities, and so I'm locked in that way. In the same way, our kids do the same. Lastly, just to talk about a little bit about how this manifests. We have a major emphasis on college in our school. Major emphasis on pushing students toward college. The one problem is most of the colleges that we pushed our students toward were predominantly white institutions. And the well-meaning people who structured the program did not understand that college, that because of the social dynamics related to college, that a kid that has grown up in a black community or a Latino community all his or her life, that all of a sudden goes to become that 1%, that 5% group on a college campus. He is urban, and now this college is rural. That socially, the kid is probably going to suffer a little bit, right? And college is, most of our most memorable points in college, they were the social times. It was not something awesome that happened in English 101. It was something awesome that happened in the quad. It was something awesome that happened at some party, some connections with friends. And so because of that dynamic. So what I introduced to them was historically black colleges and universities, and got our kids interested in that. So we took a trip to Washington, D.C. To visit Howard University, took a trip to Hampton, Virginia to visit Hampton University. And there were a couple powerful things about it. One, it was introducing the students to these other opportunities for education. Then the other powerful thing was it was placing them in a space that they had never seen before, where they're walking the campus with thousands and thousands and thousands of African American students that are pursuing higher education. Again, they saw themselves. And they got a chance to see that these kids are just like you. Like, they like to just hang out and chill out with each other, just like you like to hang out and chill out with each other. They dress like you, or they dress the way you want to dress, and they're also pursuing higher education. They had a chance to see themselves. The last piece that I'll share is there was so after the killing of Mike Brown a couple of years ago. My mind immediately goes to, all right, what do we do? What are we going to do as an action related to this? And so what we decided to do was I looked around at the kind of the job opportunities in the neighborhood, and they're very, very scarce. And realizing that if our communities are going to be uplifted, it's going to be because we uplift them. We cannot wait for somebody to decide to come and make it better. So what we decided to do, pitch this to the school, and the school went for it, is let's create our own business to create the sense within our students that they can solve their own problems. If they want better commerce in the community, build your own commerce. If you want more jobs for teens in the community, let's create jobs for teens in the community. And so in collaboration with the students at the school, we decided to create a uniform retail store. So our school had been contracting with an outside vendor in the suburbs for X number of years. All our families, 1,100 families, went there to purchase uniforms. It's a really lucrative enterprise. So we decided to undercut them, and we started our own business. It was myself and it was about 8 students. So we started this uniform company. Last year was the first year. So right in our building, families could come, they could purchase uniforms, they didn't have to drive to the burbs anymore. Families also were able to save money because our costs were lower. Our students built a business that did over $45,000 in sales last year alone. And in addition to learning how to build a business, like they also, for many of them, they got their first job. They got their first managerial opportunity. They got an opportunity to learn how to problem solve on the fly and deal with the challenges of building business. But this was something that was brought there because of an understanding of the community, an understanding of the resources that were needed, and a belief that there's great potential in the students from the community. And so just wanted to share just a couple of anecdotal pieces about what we have done through having a homegrown teacher in our school.
I have a question. With your story, you were talking about the young boys. It just really touched my heart and how they can relate to you, and you're in front of the classroom and they can see an example. But we know that at least 80% of our teachers in the classroom don't look like you. They are Caucasian women. And so, and even with that, there are still schools in Milwaukee where it would be Hispanic teachers and the students still don't look like them. So what would you recommend? What would you tell those teachers who love what they do, but they're in front of kids that they are different and they have different cultural backgrounds? What are some strategies that teachers can do to build those relationships with students who don't look like them?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I think it's about immersing oneself in the culture of the community. And I use that word community intentionally because none of us are monolithic. To be an educator on the southwest side of Chicago is different from being on the southeast side of Chicago. Neighborhood to neighborhood, there are nuances. And so my recommendation is to immerse oneself in the culture of the community. I think what we also cannot underestimate is that when it comes to self-perception of minorities in our country, a lot of our self-perception is derived from how we believe white America thinks of us. And so there is a very powerful role that I believe the white teacher plays in the Latino classroom, in the African American classroom, the Native American classroom, leave a very powerful role in sharing one's positive, genuine positive perceptions about the child. It cannot be forced because they can tell what truly comes from the heart. But I think that is a very key role to play. But then just to say secondly, I think that we have to all do more work, whether it's the school leadership. Universities have to do better work at recruiting teachers of color. There's got to be strong intentionality behind it.
And I know you have a question. I'd also like to add that if you walk away with one thing from today, it's that I hope your brain's already getting wrapped around who are the key players in my community, like Caitlin, who understand the issues that I need to connect to figure out the type of teacher in school we need to have. Because this whole conference is about how do we build those partnerships. And so last night at dinner, we were talking about having children and teachers volunteer in various aspects of the neighborhood, in a soup kitchen, in a homeless shelter. And I said, we don't really do that. What we do is help our prospective teachers ask the question, why are there homeless children in our community and what can we do about it? And so I think moving from who can you partner with and how do you work together to take action around those issues is important to think about, because one thing you heard these two talk about is they're not afraid to speak up when something happens. And sometimes you're out there alone, and the greatest part of this partnership is not to be alone when you do that. You had a question back there?
Well, it's not so much of a question, it's basically, okay, I'm a special education teacher here in Milwaukee, came to teaching sort of later in life after being in corporate world and everything. And one of the interesting things that I'm hearing with, especially when we start talking about being culturally responsive, culturally responsiveness. And this is just a very brief little tale about one of my children, my daughter, who went to school right here in Milwaukee Public Schools. She went to the High School of the Arts. She went to Golda Meir. So anyone familiar know that these schools are very culturally diverse. And when she graduated high school, she went up to Stevens Point. And I tried to, in my own way, prepare her for the environment and how different it was going to be from what she was used to here in Milwaukee. And she never went to an all-black school. She had various, role models in front of her. So, one would think, oh, she would not have a problem. Well, first semester there, she came back home for Thanksgiving. We were sitting there having dinner. And she looked at me, she said, guess what, Mom? I said, what? She says, I'm black. And I went, okay. She said, no, you don't understand. She said, I'm really, really black. And what had happened with her, she never, color was never one of those things that we spent a lot of time concentrating on because, well, just because. It never was an issue, but the moment she went to somewhere that was different from where she went normally, suddenly color became an issue. So I guess my thing is, as black educators, one of the things we can never assume, and it is just because we are black, that we understand the culture of the kids that we're coming in contact with every day, because it can be so totally different. So being culturally responsive, it can start with you looking like the person that you're working with, but you have to make sure that you go well beyond that and look at all the facets that is surrounding our kids that we're working with, and the community that they are living in, and their day-to-day life, in order to sort of get an understanding as to where they are really coming from.
And I think you mentioned something important. You mentioned also that you came to teaching later in life. A majority of our teachers candidates did as well. Most of them had other careers and had come to grow your own later in life, and this was the passion and the opportunity that they had never received. But you mentioned something about teaching and the community being important. And that's similar to what Demetria said. The southwest side and the southeast side of Chicago are very different, and just because you're black from Englewood doesn't mean you can kick it with the black folks in North Lawndale, because the entire community is different. The priorities are different, the culture is different. And so part of what Grow Your Own does is we kind of recognize those differences, and instead of that being a deficit, it becomes an asset. And so part of the application of the Grow Your Own, while people are in the pipeline, we construct a lot of opportunities that are hyper-local, that then become connected to the bigger picture. And part of something that we did in our cohort, and we made sure that all of the teacher candidates had a school in their neighborhood that they kind of adopted. And so they became, if they weren't working at a school when they came to the program, they found a school, and since then a couple of them have gotten hired at those schools that they had adopted when they were part of the program. But also kind of the training that went into it beyond the teacher preparation training. The training on how to understand the root causes of why there's homelessness, why around economic justice, and understanding how when parents work 2 to 3 jobs, they can care all they can about their children's education, they still can't make it into the classroom, and how do you overcome those things? And then we kind of dug into some academic work as well and kind of flipped it and well, here's the community analysis of that. and really had some tense conversations about how you can have, all of the perfect curriculum and practicum in the entire world, but if it's devoid of what's going on in the community, it ends up falling flat.
And so, is there a question back there?
Yeah, well, I was thinking that this has to start all the way at the top. When teachers are in college, curriculum development, because teachers just go into the classroom and, but the most of the time to community development is the open houses. These teachers don't have any knowledge at all what's going on in the community at work. And we're under so much pressure. As a matter of fact, I'm from Logan Square, Chicago. I was a teacher in Chicago. And I know Logan Square is gentrifying very fast.
Yes.
I just understand that. But the curriculum itself in the university, you got to integrate that into the teachers. They focus so much on academics and doing this and that they forget about the community they're involved in.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because that takes me into how we work together. So about 9 years ago, I was in Juan Luis's community, and we have what we call education teams or advisory boards in the various communities. And the principal of Juan Luis's high school, Jackie, was saying all of the crap that Chicago Public Schools was pouring down on her, and that she's supposed to pour it down on the teachers. And I said to her, do you think you could come and talk to the faculty about this? I said, my next vision is to get, us together around how we can learn from each other. She goes, oh yeah, right, Maureen, why don't you bring them here? So that began our community study days. So every year, our faculty go to the community as learners. And again, I'm going to challenge you to think about how you do that. We don't, the sharing of expertise, I think Northeastern's faculty is unique in some ways in that I expect them to realize we're experts at some things, but the expertise in the community is different than ours, and we have to share that expertise. So the first community we went to was Juan Luis's, and with Southwest Organizing Project on the southwest side, the Gage Park, Chicago Lawn neighborhood. Were you there that day? Yeah, Juan Luis was one of our teachers. He was a student in the college who taught the faculty about his neighborhood. So the organizers and our students became the professors to teach our faculty about what's happening in the neighborhood. All of those issues, each of the communities has various issues, but that has resulted in, so each year we've gone to a different community and we've looked at different issues. So in Caitlin's community in North Lawndale, we went to look at how, I think it's still the community in Chicago with the most men and women returning from incarceration back into the community. And so how does that affect you in the classroom if you have a kid whose parent is incarcerated or just got back home? How do we work with the families? How do we help the kids work with that? And so our faculty have grown, and I'm just going to brag 1 minute about Northeastern. We just are launching in the fall a new master's degree called Master of Arts in Teacher and Community Leader. And we envision that program as organizers, so if anyone wants to take it, organizers, like cohorts of 20, organizers and practicing teachers sitting together for 4 core courses, sharing their knowledge, and then the teachers split off and do a teacher leader endorsement, and the organizers get more deeply into how to organize around the issues. But working together, we've done things like training our Grow Your Own students on how to lobby their legislators in Washington and locally in Springfield. We've taken issues that CPS, Charlotte Danielson is the queen of CPS, and they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars bringing Charlotte Danielson in and using the lesson plans and things. And so also Doug Lamov, for a while they loved Doug Lamov, that was the du jour program. And so we did have workshops on that, but we also deconstructed it. And what is it about Doug Lamov that people find attractive, and what is it about Doug Lamov that is about controlling kids' behavior as opposed to helping them learn in a way that works for them. So we've really worked together around the education of our students. And I don't know, do you want to say anything more about that?
I mean, part of the working together also helped for our community members who were not teachers have better relationships with the teachers in the schools, because the parents and the grandparents that are involved with our organization, at least, are very supportive of the Grow Your Own Teachers program. And because of the Grow Your Own Teacher program, because they know that there are teachers who are going through these trainings, they have a better perspective about all teachers, and they look at it from a different vantage point. And we've had, one of the things with Grow Your Own, we've had an increase in the number of people in our organization that then go volunteer in their schools because they've had an interaction with one of the Grow Your Own teachers. And so part of that partnership is being able to know your lane, but also know that the lanes will cross, and how to do that respectfully, and how to do that so that everybody is stronger. Because there's parts that, with our Grow Your Own teachers, once they learn kind of the academic pieces, one of the Grow Your Own candidates is now running trainings at my organization because she learned how to be a teacher through Grow Your Own, and we want to do trainings on public policy and things like that. So she wrote curriculums for our broad membership to be able to learn these things as well. And so all of the skill sets cross over.
I just, sorry, it takes a second to come on. Just wanted to add one thing that was briefly mentioned. A lot of times yes, we do have the insight in the community because we live there, being a teacher of my community, but there's things that we do not necessarily fully understand. And another example is that when we were in those education meetings where every stakeholder from the community gave their piece or shared something that was going on, I learned about the huge impact the rate of foreclosures are having in our community and the direct impact that has in the classroom. I never knew they were so closely related, but after Jeff Bartow, the director of the Southwest Organizing Project, broke down the math that was attributed to that problem, I saw the clear connection, the clear correlation between the classroom and the rate of foreclosures. I mean, if there's houses that are being foreclosed in one block of a neighborhood, that means that there's less people in that block. That means that the local businesses have less people that are shopping there. That means that that business will eventually close down, and that one student has to go further now for just the basic necessities, maybe pop, chips, who knows, an apple. And what that does, it creates the possibility or the opportunity for more crime to possibly happen, because instead of walking one city block through an already, what's considered to be a rough neighborhood, now you have to go 3 blocks, exposing yourself to 3 times the risk, having to cross gang lines, numerous things that one never, well, at least me personally, that there might be a correlation, or there might be something that, it kind of connects, but never to that extent. And I think that's what it does. It allows you, it gives you a time to sit down, to open up your mind, and to really take everything in, and try to see, how do I use this knowledge that was just passed on to me, and how can I apply it to my classroom? How can I apply it to my students so that they can be successful?
Let's say that. So we want to be sure that if you have questions or concerns, we have time for them. We don't want to act like this is easy. And we don't want to have you leave here thinking, if I look at my community and I find my community agencies to partner with me, everything's going to be just great. Because oftentimes universities go into communities as if they know everything, and act as if the community doesn't have these strengths and assets that we find that we can build with. So, we did want to run down the challenges we've had, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I think we've mentioned some of the key aspects related to this program. And I want to say that Grow Your Own was not just in Chicago. It was in predominantly white rural areas of Illinois, Southern Illinois, Western Illinois. We have one cohort on the northeast side that's has many white students in it, most of whom are European ethnic students who can speak 4 and 5 languages. But so, while, as Demetrius said, we are unabashedly about increasing the number of teachers of color, it doesn't mean we're also not helping all of the teachers in our neighborhoods get certified and build the skills that we have. But I will say that unless there's a true partnership, a joint commitment to the vision of what Grow Your Own is, and that is about school reform from the inside out, it falls apart. So when the money started drying up, many of the other universities folded. They folded their programs, especially in the more rural areas. My university, Northeastern, doubled down and said, if you lose the money, we'll help with the funding. So we helped dig up some money for scholarships. We helped, my provost allowed me to have the faculty have release time to work with Grow Your Own. But I will tell you, at the same time that was happening, we won 3 national awards for Grow Your Own, the College of Ed. One for the work in Latino neighborhoods, one for the general work that we've done to build our curriculum to be more responsive to the community. And those have been good things for our university and also for the community organizations because they've helped us get more private funding. But without the commitment to the vision, it will fall apart. So I think it's important to really understand why this is important. And I talked to teachers last night who've been in their districts their whole life, who will finish their careers in their districts. So you are already doing what we're advocating. The question is, how do we get more teachers of color before kids so that your faculty looks like what the nation looks like, regardless of what your community's demographics are? And I think that's where I would ask you, Jimmy Lugo wrote an article about the strength of Grow Your Own teachers, which is in your packet, and when you have a time, I hope you'll look at it. Jimmy has hired Jimmy is a principal who grew up in Logan Square, Humboldt Park, where his school is located. He has hired 5 Grow Your Own teachers. He'd hire every one of them if he could, because he sees the benefits of what we're doing. So I want to open it up to questions. Do you want to finish up with anything?
I mean, kind of touching on the commitment that's necessary. Part of it is yes, the commitment to the education into the classroom, but also commitment to the long-term vision of transformation, and being able to have the conversations that are tough sometimes, being able to vision together and get creative and take some risks and see what happens, and then just being able to always come back to why we're here. I think that I want to open up for questions, but I think that's the root of why people would follow today.
I have one question. So ultimately you speak about an aim that is to be reached. Is the aim to then deconstruct perceived levels of education as has been offered by the Caucasian Eurocentric field?
Whoa. I mean, I think we want to completely reform the education, and part of the inside out is a little bit of deconstruction, but I think it's also, we want to be able to take the best of what is out there academically, and the best of what the community has to offer, and create something new that is sustainable, that is really centered around the entire life of the child, not just the child's test scores, not just what happens within the 4 walls of the classroom, but also really reach into the families and the parents, and making sure that those folks are invested in, or I should say welcomed into the classroom as well. So I think yes and no at the same time. I think part of it is we want to create something new, and we want it to be sustainable.
Right. I'd like to add one more thing to what Betty said earlier. Is there anything being done then to prepare the other side of the tracks for this new level of excellence?
Tell me what you mean. Nope. Tell me what you mean by that.
What I mean by that is when education takes place, you guys have all spoken to that. If someone sees me standing in the classroom, they perceive that's what can be attained. But I remember standing in a classroom and my kids looking at me. I come from a South African context. My kids looked at me and said, "You sound like a white man." Well, what the hell does that mean? just because I articulate, because, you know, I enunciate my words, as was said earlier. Why do you perceive that to be the level of excellence? So I've had to fight that my whole life, because I grew up under apartheid, so it's a totally different thing. So I've gotten to a point where I'm totally comfortable. I came to Wisconsin 7 years ago. It's white here. I fight that as well. But you have to walk into a classroom and you have to work with that idea. And yet at the same time, I understand when you were speaking about being sensitive to what's happening in the neighborhood. So hunting season, I don't give homework, right? It's the open day, I know not to do that. I have to take note of these things I would never, ever have considered. But it's being aware of those things. So you want to bring that in. So this is my new thing. If you do create the space, I was talking to somebody earlier. Whistling Vivaldi, the book Whistling Vivaldi speaks about the idea is that if you give identity contingencies to someone, they perform based on those identity contingencies, which means your academic record then falls when in fact you try to aspire. The other rhetoric that goes with that is where my question is going, like, you're trying to be white is a rhetoric that I grew up with as soon as I wanted to do more than what I felt I was doing. So it's that kind of, people have it. And then the other thing that I'm writing on with this is the funding, finance. I taught in a community that 43,000 people. 0.03% of those people ever went on to tertiary education, just because of the lack of money. How do we address that thought in a situation where kids have aspirations and they want to bring their new, level of excellence, their own one, inspired by their community, but if there's no funding, how do you deal with it?
So Tracy, that's for your next year's conference? I'm serious, you're raising such good questions. On a very superficial level, I could argue that, we can help kids find funding to go to college, and the whole college selection and the whole college entrance is really, we can problematize that for the next year. And so, I think that we are trying to address multi-level problems, teachers in classrooms and community-based reform and school reform, changing a deficit model to an asset model around high-needs communities, becoming activists and not being afraid to speak out, and how it connects to those other things is what I lay awake at night thinking about. Because how do we help? We have 58 graduates in 10 years. That's a drop in the bucket. But I think the model is huge. And so I've had these arguments with the higher ups in Washington, D.C. and stuff, because we could scale up our model if you would fund us. You do not want to fund black and brown people. That's just the bottom line. We could scale up this model. Meanwhile, another program that asks you to only stay 2 years in the classroom is getting $10 million a year from the federal government. And so our priorities are really screwed up. So again, next year's conference.
I just want to add, one thing about the funding. And I heard someone else use this analogy and it really helped me understand it, and I hope it does the same for you. Where you're building a bridge, that middle, the keystone, is the most expensive and the hardest piece that you will have in that entire bridge. That has already been laid out for GYO. So everything else that's coming down, there is already a pipeline, there is already somewhat of a paved road for those next candidates. And that's something that, once you get that first candidate through there, then that just sets the road for the rest. So it's just that one piece to the bridge. Hope that it helps.
You had your hand up so long.
Thanks, yeah. One of the challenges I'm finding working with folks coming into the teaching profession, and I taught for 10 years, love teaching, it's the best. And I love the grow your own idea. In Wisconsin, we have we have Praxis 1, Praxis 2, Y-FORT, and the NTPA. We have these 4 assessments that candidates have to take. They're costly, and often I find they're gatekeeping measures. In Illinois, when you're growing your own, are you up against something like that, and how do you help your candidates?
Caitlin and I are laughing because we just created hell in Illinois over the basic skills test. So the State Board of Ed raised the cut score on the basic skills test 2 standard errors of measure over what the cut score panel recommended. So I'm not a psychometrician, so I had to look that up. That means basically if you don't pass it the first time without intense intervention, you're not gonna pass it again. So right now, the state pass rate on that exam is 52% for all test takers. That includes graduate students, you know, who are doing a post-bac route. And the the pass rate for Black and Latino students is in single digits. So we actually went at that pretty hard. We called a legislative hearing from Action Now. We embarrassed the State Department of Ed. That came back to haunt us a couple times a little bit. That came back to haunt us. But I mean, they had no, that's where the partnership between the community and I can't even speak enough about this. We did the research at the university level. We presented data that these tests make no difference. We got teachers who won golden apples to say if this cut score had been in, they wouldn't be allowed to be a teacher. The organizers called a legislative hearing of the Education Committee of the Senate in Springfield for this testimony, and we didn't get a change. And then we changed tactics, which is what I learned to do from them. I said, look, the superintendent's not gonna budge. What do we do next? We get an alternative. So we got an alternative ACT cut score of 22, and that has made a big difference. We've got more kids in with the 22. I could go on forever about the EdTPA, but at the same time, my faculty are writing articles exposing the problems with EdTPA, and you can Google those articles. We are working to be sure our students pass. So it was consequential last year for the first time with the most diverse student body in the Midwest. We had a 93.7 pass rate in the fall and a 98% pass rate in the spring. So these students can do it. It's not that they can't do it. It's, you know, it's fighting the roadblocks. So to have these partners with me, I'm not out there alone because I'll be totally honest with you, some of the ed deans won't be activists and they won't get on board.
Maybe you could clarify for me, organizationally, this is an Illinois program and it's funded by the state?
It was.
It was funded. It's completely cut off.
Completely cut off from funding them.
So now you have to find private, do you apply for like federal grants? How do you fund?
Yeah, we always have had private funding. So in the beginning, when we had a lot of money 11 years ago, we were able to give transportation stipends. The tuition assistance comes in the form of a forgivable loan. So whatever they don't qualify for in Pell Grants, if they teach 5 years in an urban setting, they get their loan forgiven. But we also had child care stipends, we had transportation stipends, we had book stipends, and little by little that was eroded until last year it was nothing. And so our numbers of students have been cut in half at Northeastern because we can still help with tuition. I help with private scholarships. We try to keep as many students as we could, and I'll be honest with you, this is where the issue comes in. We prioritize those students who are already admitted to the College of Ed for the most funding, and then try to keep the ones who are not in the College of Ed yet going by, even if they only took 1 or 2 courses at a time. But, you know, on my worst days, I feel like it's a conspiracy theory against those really strong programs that recruit Black and Latino teachers, because, you know, if we had the will, we could do this. We could.
I'm a middle school principal in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which is a very white community. The number of students of color is primarily students of poverty. And the concern I have is trying to offer jobs to teachers who are teachers of color that will look like my students, and then asking them to live in my very white community. Am I asking too much? Because there's not a salon where you can get your hair done. You're not gonna find the foods that are ethnically diverse. The community is a very white community. I would love to be able to have that diversity, but are we asking too much?
So it's a very interesting challenge, but I think that that you will find plenty of teachers of color that would take that opportunity. I mean, we live in a global society now where, you know, straight out of college, one might take a first job, you know, halfway around the world. And not only is there cultural difference, but there's also a language barrier. So I think if the recruiting efforts are made, I think you would find teachers that would take it. And then also just understand, like I for about 6 years of my life lived in majority white neighborhoods, so I'm comfortable playing that role when I have to. And I think for a lot of millennial and like younger Gen X African Americans that were children kind of in that the early integration flight to suburbia kind of group, totally understand how to be that one black guy in the office, in the neighborhood, in the school, and they could play that role.
When it comes to actually actively recruiting teachers that look like the students, especially in such a restrictive environment where everything else around them seems to be white, it just takes me back to one of my experiences as being a first or second year teacher. One of the teachers that I learned the most from was this guy who was a couple of years younger than me. He was white, and we worked in a predominantly minority school. I think it was about half African American, half Hispanic. And he was white, as white can be. I don't know what that means, but he was super quirky, super dorky, but this guy gave it his heart. He went in there to these ghetto kids, quote unquote, that were knowing about these gangs, and he didn't care. He went in there with his heart. And I learned a lot from him. And until this day, everything that I have in my classroom, I still go back to him. One thing I will say about him, he was a Second City alum, so he did have a lot of that theater and acting in him. And the kids fed off of that, and that's something that I try to incorporate all the time. So maybe it's not that the solution is, yes, the kids must look like the teacher. I mean, ideally, in a perfect world, right? But we know that there's limited amount of teachers. We know that they're not out there. And these kids still need to have their education. I think at the end of the day, you just have to go in there with a heart and just give it your best. And I know that sounds so idealistic and it sounds so cliche and so romantic and it's beautiful, but kids are not dumb. I don't care if your kids are reading 2 years above their reading level, 3 years below it. None of that matters. There's a different cognitive ability that it comes when you're using your heart. And these kids can sense it out, they can sniff it out, they can recognize it. They don't care if you're short, brown, yellow, Puerto Rican, Asian, they don't care. The only thing they care about is that you're going in there and you're putting them on a pedestal. They love to be put on a pedestal. Any student that I've met in my entire life, they just love to be told, oh, you are the best thing ever. And you know what, me as a teacher, I do believe that. I don't care what student and what your limited abilities may be, or if you have the world at the palm of your hand. If you tell them that you can do it, and you do it sincere enough, they will be able to feed off of that. And they'll go as far as they could imagine themselves going. So I don't know that necessarily answered what your question was.
I would also add to challenger districts where they're recruiting. So, very few districts from Wisconsin come to the career fair at Northeastern. And, we've got a lot of bilingual teachers, a lot of diverse teachers. But, are they recruiting at Hampton? Are they recruiting at Howard? Are they recruiting at Spelman? Are they looking around at some of the federally designated Hispanic serving institutions like UIC and Northeastern? There are places where if you have 5 openings and you can offer jobs, then people aren't necessarily going to be alone, and it may cause the whole community to think about how welcoming they are to people who don't look like them.
Thank you.
I think, Tracy, are we?
Maybe one more
One
question.
more question. Anybody haven't asked you a question yet?
Hi, I teach in Madison, and teach on the east side. And I hear you talking about how there's a correlation between the foreclosures and student achievement where you are. Maybe, I'm also a late in life teacher. I'm just like 5 or 6 years in second career. And maybe it's just because I'm old and cranky, but I have a big problem with gentrification in my neighborhood. And if you've ever been in Madison and driven down Willie Street, kitty corner from where Tony Robinson, who's African American, kid killed by a cop a couple years ago, Kitty Corner, they took out a block of old lower income housing and putting up condos. And I just go, you know, what is, so if the foreclosures have a really strong effect on the community and student achievement, what does gentrification, and do you guys have any experience or have seen this on Logan Square?
One thing I would say is go on the Logan Square neighborhood website because they are doing major battle right now with gentrification. Also, our other partner, Organizing Neighborhoods for Equality, Northside, they've been fighting gentrification for years and have got the single room occupancy law passed, and a law where if you are a builder and you're building, you know, a 50-unit condo building, a certain percentage of those need to be set aside for medium and low-income families, or you pay a big fine. Sadly, many of them are paying the big fine because they don't care. But those two organizations are out front in Chicago around gentrification and what it's doing. The one thing about working with organizations in Chicago is they help each other out. So even if Caitlin's organization isn't doing so much work on housing, well, she does a lot on housing, but gentrification, they show up for the rallies and the actions around other neighborhoods. I don't know if you have other suggestions.
I mean, the other thing I was thinking when Action Now worked on the foreclosure mediation program, part of it came from trying to figure out a solution to gentrification and trying to address the foreclosure issues. So kind of going back to the partnership, I think we had the first couple trainings we did around housing, we had some grow your own candidates there. And what came about is a new law in Cook County that allowed foreclosure mediation to happen, as well as a vacant property ordinance so that we could make sure that vacant properties were secured. And so part of that came from having the community figure out their own solutions. So I would just also encourage you to partner with community organizations there, because there may be a lot of ways that you can generate ideas and build bridges.
Thank you. I believe the session starts at